Hello there ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing? It's Alexander Hilly123 here and it's time for a new video, and as you can see from the title, it is a top 10 metal albums video today. I did the top 10 folk albums just last week, it was uploaded and I enjoyed it and I thought I'd do my top 10 metal albums as well. Now, you're not going to see another one of these for at least another 6 months. I think I'm probably going to do a top 10 Beatles albums next just because it's so iconic. But for example, the reason I want to haul these in a little bit is because I was also going to do a top 10 albums, I should say, of a particular band in this list, but when you see that they are so high up in this list, there'd be no point in watching it, for example, because you'd know which album is going to be number one, needless to say, because I've already put it in this video here, which is my favourite metal albums of all time. So when I come to talk about that specific artist, of course it's going to be number one, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, I do find them fun to do, but I'm going to space them out. I'm not going to do another one of these for a while. But anyway, metal. Maybe some elitists and snobs will find this video. Go fuck yourselves if there are any out there. I listened to a lot of metal back in the day when I was in my late teens, early 20s. Now I'm 28 years old. I'm an old man. Stuck in my ways, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not enjoying that much new music of any genre, really. I don't know what it is, but I'm just not. I don't know if this is something that happens as you get older. Perhaps it is. But in the last 3 or 4 years, I've become stagnant within my music and the evolution of my music taste. It's just, I guess you get to a point where you don't get into as much music as you used to. I'm finding that to be the case for me anyway. But I'm going to talk about some artists who nearly got in the top 10 first, ladies and gentlemen, but didn't quite. First of all, Down, Nola, that's New Orleans, Louisiana. Phil Anselmo is the lead singer of that band, if you don't know, and that's stoner metal, more my vibe than Pantera. I like some Pantera music here and there, I made some classic songs, not get me wrong, but Down, more my style. The second Down album was a very bluesy, heavy blues stoner vibe. Very good. Opeth, Blackwater Park. I mean, Opeth, I've got a t-shirt, I love them, but the reason they're not in the top 10 list is because every album is kind of not brought down. It's just my style. I'm not a big fan of death metal growls. Michael Ackerfeld, the lead singer, you know, is one of my musical icons. Made some incredible music, and all over the course of the discography, I adore Opeth. But as a consistent album, because of the growls and the more heavier side of things, I mean, I like really heavy music, but I'm not keen on those style of vocals. So, Blackwater Park, one of my favourite albums. It's very nearly in the top 10, but didn't quite make it. Some of the early Sepultura albums, if I'm pronouncing that right, with Max Cavalera, like Beneath the Remains, or Still Remains, is it? One of the two, and Chaos AD. I'm not good with names, but some of the early 90s, late 80s Sepultura stuff was fucking ace. Symphony X, great progressive metal band if you've never heard of them. The self-titled album, a lot of the 90s material, awesome. Typo Negative, gothic through and through. I love some gothic rock and metal. Probably October Rust, my favourite album. I'm not a big fan of them these days, but I really thought Machine Head were a very good band back in the days of The Blackening. That album's over 10 years old now. That was a very good album. And also Dream Theater, Images and Words, and Awake, some classic Dream Theater. Not too keen on them these days. They've just gone a bit silly, but Images and Words is a beautiful album. Very consistent. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, number 10 now, and here is a band who have only made, as far as I'm aware, 3 LPs, and it's not my style, but it's in this list because the songs I think are so consistent and so well done. Typically, within the metal community, they receive a bit of a bad press for some reason. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be because it's melodic death metal instead of normal death metal. Here we go. I said I didn't like this style, and this isn't at number 10, but here we go. It's Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates, and I think I've put this one in the list because the album just opens up so consistently and so furiously. Let's have a look here. Blinded by Fear, Slaughter of the Soul, Cold Under a Serpent's Sun. We have a tiny little instrumental with Into the Dead Sky, and then they hit us with the 2 best songs on the album, in my opinion, in Suicide Nation, and also my possibly favourite headbanging track of all time, World of Lies. That intro is fantastic, it's groovy, and then it hits you with this full-on melodic death metal thrash bullshit, which is just crazy. and it's awesome. The vocals are in acquired taste, to say the least. The other stuff I've listened from at the gates, the album before this, Terminal Spirit Disease, was pretty good. I like it. And the last one, at War of Reality, was kind of like a worse version of Slaughter of the Soul, but I kind of liked it from what I heard. Well, it's a while since I listened to it now, a couple of years ago. The early stuff I couldn't get into. The production was muddy, but people absolutely adore it, but it's a bit more full on. Some of the riffs and solos in this album are absolutely beautiful, and they intertwine with the brutality of the riffing and the vocals very well, especially on tracks like Nausea near the end. Just listen to that track, you'll know what I'm talking about. But for me, 34 minutes of pummeling brutality at the gates, Slaughter of the Soul, it's fucking ace. Anyway, number 9, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to slow it down, and yet again, it's time to get gothic. I ain't going to apologise, I like it gothic. Some people are going to have problems with my top 10. It's Draconian Times by Paradise Lost, the Northern Monkeys. Fellow Northern Monkeys, just like myself. These guys are from Halifax in Yorkshire, and they're one of my favourite metal bands, one of my favourite bands of all time, of any genre. And this, for me, is their last metal album before they increasingly became more of a rock band or an electronic band inspired by kind of Depeche Mode. And this is pure gothic metal. Their early stuff was doomy as fuck with growled vocals, and you know, they made an album called Gothic, for goodness sake, released in 1991. And this album, it's a weird one because it took its time to really grow on me, and I prefer some of the tracks on the album before this called Icon, but that album also has inconsistent tracks, I think. So there's like 15 songs on there, or 13, sorry, I should say. 2 also B-sides. But the songs I absolutely adore more than that's on Draconian Times, which is what I picked for my top 10, but there are also weaker tracks. The thing is with Draconian Times, I listen to it and I like every song, but there's only a few I love. It's really strange, but it's very consistent. It's kind of monotonous, but in a good way. A lot of these songs sound similar, but it's got that same dark theme, yet it's not incredibly heavy. It's probably an accessible album once you get into a couple more of Paradise Lost albums. I mean, I've just got to say, I love the more recent stuff as well. They went to a kind of gothic hard rock style in Requiem and Paradise Lost itself, self-titled. Plague Within and Medusa, the new stuff, has seen them go to a more grimy and dirty doom sound like their early stuff. They've come full circle. It's incredible. But this was released, like I say, in May 95. But if you want a fantastic, consistent gothic rock album with a tinge of metal, then listen to Draconian Times. Ladies and gentlemen, number 8 now, a band who I haven't listened to in a number of years. You know what it's like when you're younger. You really enjoy a certain band, artist and music, and you go off them and you don't listen to them for ages, but you've got to hold your hands up and say, holy fucking shit, did they make some great stuff. And for me, in at number 8, I've got to pay my respects to Dave Mustaine and Megadeth for Rust in Peace. Now, I much prefer another band that Dave Mustaine was once in. Oh dear Lord, I may as well say the name, but I'm not going to. You might know who they are though, they are in this list. But Rust in Peace is just an incredibly well-produced album with incredible musicianship, great lyrics. It's always had a political edge to it with Megadeth and Dave Mustaine. It's very dark, but it's thrashy as fuck. And did I mention the consistency? Yeah, well, it's consistent. This was released in September 1990, just after my first birthday. Running in at 40 minutes, and like I say, it's just an incredible album, opening up with Holy Wars, The Punishment Due, and it ends with Rust in Peace, Polaris. 2 longer tracks, progressive, very progressive, I've got to say. There's some shorter, thrashier tracks in the middle. Everyone knows Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Take No Shit. A few instrumental tracks and slower moments here as well, but nearly everything is on point. And I think it's David Ellefson who is the main guitarist, along with Dave Mustaine here. 2 Daves, better than 1, ladies and gentlemen. And what can I say, Rust in Peace is just one of the best metal albums of all time. Surely there aren't anyone Or isn't anyone out there denying that? Or maybe there are. But yeah, Megadeth, they released, was it Endgame? I think it was Endgame. That album was released in 2009, and that was brilliant. That ran this album very close in terms of consistency and quality. But since then, they've released 3 albums, which I'm not really interested in. 13, Super Collider, which was supposedly diabolical, and Dystopia. And I think they should call it a day now. But it's years since I listened to Countdown to Extinction and Euthanasia, the albums after this particular album, Rest in Peace, and I really want to listen to them again, because it's been at least 3 or 4 years since I did. I don't think they're quite as good as Rest in Peace, but I remember them being pretty solid nevertheless. But at number 7, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go to Europe. It's time to go to the 2000s. How many of these albums are in the 2000s? Just let me tell you. Only 3, and this is one of the 3. It is From Mars to Sirius, the 3rd studio album by the French progressive death metal band Gojira. Gojira, I've got a t-shirt, just like I said with Opeth at the start of the video, and this is one of the best metal albums of all time in my opinion. It's a modern classic, now 12 years old, and The Way of All Flesh and Le Font Sauvage, how about that for French, yeah? Are also fantastic albums, and I very nearly picked Le Font Sauvage, but I didn't, because I feel like this album is a bit more consistent. Its theme is brilliant as well. Gojira are very big on the environment, and especially whales and sharks and a lot of wildlife that you'd find in the water. Would it be wildlife then? I'm not sure. But yeah, they're all about the environment, and okay, I'm not so much into that, but you can't really call out the passion that these guys have. The production is fantastic, the guitar playing awesome, some slower head banging moments, thrashier sections, growled vocals, but you can actually understand what they're saying. Now, you can have growled vocals and not understand a word. You can also have growled vocals and understand a lot of what's being said. With Gojira, especially in the slower songs and slower moments, I find myself being able to understand what Jean Duplantier is singing or growling about, and that really helps me. 12 songs on here, 67 minutes in length. It's not a short album. It's not an easy album to get into. I'd recommend someone to listen to personally, Le Font Sauvage, to get into Gojira. But then if you like that, jump to From Mars to Sirius, slowly get into it, ease your way in, and hopefully you'll find yourself enjoying it. Ocean Planet, Backbone from the Sky is great, where dragons dwell, the heaviest matter of the universe. And they do that on this album. They give you a thrashy track, and then they slow it down, and it's just like a chuggy, slow metal song. Awesome. World to Come, and the incredibly moving Global Warming. Very emotional piece with poignant lyrics, and it's done very, very well, because not all metal bands can get away with doing something like that without it being called cheesy. But there's no doubt it's not a cheesy track. It's very sincere. My personal track, though, is Flying Whales, which has this very slow build-up, and then it absolutely fucking explodes with one of the best headbanging sections of a song I've ever heard. It's incredible. Turn it up and listen to that motherfucker. It's Gojira, From Mars to Sirius. Ladies and gentlemen, number 6 now. You want to keep it turned all the way up for this one, because it's the 5th studio album by American thrash metal band Slayer, and it's my favourite Slayer album, Seasons in the Abyss. And I'm just going to jump right in with this one and tell you why it's my favourite one. And the reason it's my favourite one is because it blends together Angel of Death, oh not Angel of Death, what's it called, Rain in Blood, is it? Yeah, Rain in Blood and South of Heaven, and melds it into one for Seasons in the Abyss. Rain in Blood was pure thrash. I don't think there's a song on there that isn't thrash. It's pure insanity. Your head nearly falls off whilst you're listening to it, your head banging so much. And South of Heaven had a lot of slower tracks, a few which harked back to the Rain in Blood album. It was still critically acclaimed, but not quite as well received. And then for Seasons in the Abyss, they genuinely melded both of those albums together to make this, in my opinion. Good production, Tom Araya on top form, as always. You know what you're going to get in terms of lyrics, dismemberment and some torture, and we know what we get in on Rain and Blood, I should say, about Nazis and World War and all that. It's just absolutely horrifying. It's dark, it's disturbing, and Tom Araya, one of the nicest guys in the world, never mind in the music, in the world. Such a lovely man. But yeah, it says here, Slayer rarely turns to demonic visions of the afterlife anymore, preferring instead to find tangible horror in real life, war, murder, and human weakness. There's even fully fledged social criticism. Yeah, because there wasn't any social criticism until this album. It's very slight, but it's in there. So maybe, I guess you could say lyrically, this album is a little bit more diverse for Slayer, but it's just a near perfect album. And you've got the thrashy tracks, you've got Blood Red, what's another one? I think Hallowed Point and Born of Fire are thrash tracks. Then you've got slower ones, like Skeletons of Society, which is one of my favourites. And then for me, one of the top 10 metal songs ever, Seasons in the Abyss, with one hell of an intro. Oh man, just incredible. This album runs in at 42 minutes as well. Perfect time for a thrash album, I reckon. Released in October 1990, this one. And for me, this is the last incredible Slayer album. After this, I did enjoy Divine Intervention, and then I really enjoyed Christ Illusion. God Hates Us All as a new metal vibe, but I've got to admit, I don't mind. I like God Hates Us All as well. The last two Slayer albums, World Painted Blood and Repentless, I wasn't keen on. And at this stage, I kind of want them to just stop making music. Also, R.I.P. to Jeff Hanneman. Crazy motherfucker. Such a tragedy that he left us so soon. But in at number 5, ladies and gentlemen, an artist, a band who I've already made a top 10 of. Because they're my favourite band. Probably ever. It's Katatonia with The Great Cold Distance. So if they're my favourite band, shouldn't they automatically be in at number 1? No. Reason being, this album is probably the least typically metal sounding album on the list, because it's a bit more diverse. There are heavy tracks on this album which are definitely metallic, and then there are others that are totally not metallic, and a very chorus, verse, chorus, and a pop melody, and there's no thrashing, there's no crazy solos, stuff like that. But yet and still, I think it would go under the moniker and the label of metal music. Just quite gothic and dark. It's got a progressive edge as well, I'd say. A lot of these tracks are nearly 5 minutes long. You actually look at the track list in this album, they are insanely consistent. There are 5 tracks on the album, 6 actually, out of 12 are 4 minutes and 21 seconds. How weird's that? I don't think that's a coincidence. They were probably aiming to do that. And this album, I said it's my second favourite Katatonia album. They've made 10. So the only reason this isn't number 5, like I said, is because it's less typically metal than some of the others. It's one of the best albums ever. Starting up with Leaders. There's a bit of screamed vocals in this album. Not from Jonas Rensk himself, but I guess it's one of the other members of the band. Oh, wait a minute. Backing vocals. Daniel Lykvist, the old drummer. Yeah, his screamed background vocals really work well here. And I think this is the heaviest thing Katatonia have done after coming out of the doom metal period. Brave Murder Day. After this album, they've kind of distanced themselves from metal. Night is a New Day and Dead End Kings go much more for atmosphere. This album's got incredible atmosphere, but then it pummels you with riffs on the heavier tracks, whereas Night is a New Day and Dead End Kings don't. I mean, the recent album, The Fall of Hearts, was more of a pure progressive rock album, in my opinion. I love all the styles of Katatonia, but I do miss the heavier edge. I even miss the old school Brave Murder Day days, even though I'm not a huge fan of many albums like that with death metal vocals. But yeah, they're my favourite band, and Great Cold Distance in at number 5. In at number 4, ladies and gentlemen, are my favourite metal band of all time. So, like I said before, shouldn't it be at number 1? You know, Katatonia, my favourite artist overall, These guys are my favourite metal band because they probably started the ball rolling. It is Black Sabbath, and it's the 5th studio album, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. And one of the most interesting things in this list was how I was going to pick a particular album of theirs. And the word at the end of the day has to be consistency. The reason I picked this one, I wasn't anticipating to go for this. I was anticipating to go for either Paranoid or Master of Reality. Paranoid because it's the second album, it's the one with the self-titled track Paranoid on it, and it's just bloody incredible, of course, as the first 6 Sabbath albums are incredible up to Sabotage. Master of Reality, Stoner Rock. It is the start of Stoner. It's heavy as fuck, even today. After Forever, no one likes that track. Even I don't like that track. And it's got a few little kind of segue pieces of music, which are like a minute long, which don't really do anything. But still amazing. But I'd pick Sabbath Bloody Sabbath because of its incredible consistency. This album, 42 minutes long. There are 8 tracks on the album, a side A and a side B, as they used to do back in the day. You got Sabbath Bloody Sabbath opening up. You've got a National Acrobat. You've got Fluff, the instrumental track. Sabra Cadabra, Killing Yourself to Live, very doomy track. Who Are You, Looking for Today, Spiral Architect. And that's the thing. What I did with this album is I looked at the weaker ones on the album altogether, like Who Are You and Looking for Today. And I thought to myself, you know what? I still really enjoy these pieces of music, even though they're not as good as the best songs on here, like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Sabra Cadabra, Killing Yourself to Live, and Spiral Architect. I don't think this is consistently as heavy as something like Volume 4 or Master of Reality. But like I say, it's varied, diverse, still heavy, great lyrics, similar lyrically than their earlier stuff, I guess. And yeah, I don't know what there is more to say. I'm a fan of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules with Ronnie James Dio, but it's not about the fact that Ronnie James Dio has a better voice than Ozzy. Of course he did. He was a more powerful vocalist, but Ozzy's style suited the old school Black Sabbath. If that was Ronnie James Dio on those first 6 albums, wouldn't have been good, even though he was a much better singer. Got to say as well, if you are a Sabbath fan and you've never heard the album Dehumanizer, give it a listen. It's one of the most underrated albums. It's the heaviest album. It is with Ronnie James Dio, but it's awesome. Early 90s. I also quite enjoy the Headless Cross. I think it was the guy from Deep Purple who did the vocals on that album. That's pretty cool. And of course, some of the 80s stuff was pretty shit, but overall, love Sabbath. Got a poster, after all, and one of the best bands ever. And yeah, amazing. In at number 3, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go very serious now. We're going to the modern day, would you believe, 2006, for the 3rd full-length album by the American metal band Agalloch. But it's more than just metal. We're having a bit of folk, we're having a bit of black metal for the first time in this list, a bit of doom yet again, and a bit of post-metal, all melded into one pot. And it tastes delicious, ladies and gentlemen. This is running in at 60 minutes in length, and with it being so long, you might think that it's not a good place to start with Agalloch. But it is, because it's actually very accessible in my opinion, and that's the thing. You know, Agalloch are not an easy band to get into. If you don't like that kind of music, you're not going to get it. But if you do like bands who are in the genres, of ones I've just mentioned, all those metal subgenres, you got to give Agalloch a listen. I started with these guys, I can't remember, but I think it was with The Mantle and this album, back in about 2009, 2010. I was listening to The Mantle and then Ashes Against the Grain, and I finally listened to both albums, and Ashes Against the Grain stuck with me first. Now, I've got to say straight off the bat that The Mantle is a fantastic album, but due to tracks like the Hawthorne Passage and In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion, with them being way over 10 minutes, I struggled to get into them. But of course, like I said, Ashes Against the Grain has longer tracks. Longer tracks have always been a part of the story with Agalloch because they're very progressive. But this album, for me personally, has a much cleaner production and a bit more of a, I'm not going to say pop, but you listen to Limbs and Falling Snow, absolutely gorgeous beginning. Pummeling drums, long introductions before, like minutes before, you only hear John Horn, the vocalist, come into the mix, and then you decide whether you like his vocals or not. I am not a huge fan. I know I've repeated it many times, but I've got to, because it's just my taste. I'm not a fan of those kind of vocals, but with John Horn, it all works in this album for me to enjoy it. And not only that, but like I said before, post-metal and also ambient vibe on Our Fortress is Burning #1, This White Mountain on Which You Will Die, and Our Fortress is Burning Free, The Grain. All those tracks are more ambient, if you will, or kind of something like Stars of the Lid, or old school, maybe Pianino, or something like that. This White Mountain on Which You Will Die, it's only 1:39, but it works. It's not like, oh, this is a tiny short piece of music, we couldn't be arsed, we're putting it in the album anyway. That happens so often with music, but with this particular track, that's not the case. It fits its purpose, and it's very harrowing. It's a dark album. It's Agalloch, for God's sake. But yeah, I mean, the album after this, The Marrow of the Spirit, completely lost me. I think, let me have a look here. I didn't enjoy it that much. Here we go. The band felt that their previous album, Ashes Against the Grain, sounded too polished and opted for a more raw sound, saying that it felt more alive and real. And I think that it was done on analog, I think. Please forgive me, I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I didn't get Marrow of the Spirit. The tracks, hold on a minute. There's one at 12 minutes, there's one at 18 minutes, and I can sit down and listen to a long piece of music, you know. That Symphony X one that's 24 minutes, a few Dream Theater tracks which are insanely long, some Pink Floyd stuff, King Crimson, stuff like that. I can listen to long passages of music, but I just didn't get Marrow of the Spirit, and it was because of the production, and the polished production is what made me enjoy Ashes Against the Grain more so, because I'm not usually a fan of that kind of music, and I know other people will feel the same. But having said that, if someone tells me their favourite Agalloch album is The Mantle, hey, listen, I'm not going to call them out. I've also got to say, Pale Folklore, the first album, is utterly sensational. That's not like Ashes Against the Grain all the way through, and yet I really, really love that album as well. Oh man, looking at the track listings, so sad that Agalloch are gone. If anyone has any recommendations of bands similar to Agalloch, please tell me, but I don't think you'll find one personally. Ladies and gentlemen, in at number 2, it's time to talk about them. Dave Mustaine's old friends. You know who they are. But is it going to be Ride the Lightning, or is it going to be Master of Puppets? It's going to be neither. It is And Justice for All, an album with flaws. There can be no doubt. But the things that I love about this album place it up at number 2, because it's so punishing, it's so fucking heavy, and the progressive edge. You know, just then I was speaking about some progressive rock bands. I love progressive rock music, and what Metallica did on this album was, okay, they went more progressive, but they didn't go less heavy. They went more heavy. They went more technical, and it was probably very hard for them to make this album. And I guess they used the death of Cliff Burton, the bassist, as inspiration for this album, mixed in with the more social kind of malaise and decay that you see, because that's vocally, lyrically what this album is all about. Obviously you got Lady Justice, Lady Liberty, whatever she's called, on the front cover, blindfolded, holding up the scales. The album itself is called Injustice for All. And, you know, Hetfield was pretty good at those those types of lyrics, I should say. Fucking hell. It doesn't come across as naive or silly. The guy knows what he's talking about. He lays out some really dark stuff here. Blackened as well, which I guess could be seen as an environmental track, if you will. Somewhat. Vaguely. And Justice for All, Eye of the Beholder, everyone knows one, probably one of the best outros of a song ever. The Shortest Straw has been pulled for you. Harvester of Sorrow, the frayed ends of sanity. To live is to die, and Dyer's Eve. Probably not as thrashy as Master of Puppets, and of course the first album, Kill 'Em All. But that's it. People equate pace to heaviness, and I don't, because I love doom metal. And sometimes a slower track can be heavier than a thrashy track. In my opinion, it's all about the sound. I love Electric Wizard, for example. If you know who Electric Wizard are, they came close to getting on this list. Funeralopolis is an insanely heavy album. But yeah, Dyer's Eve is a thrashy track to finish it off, and it's not one of my favourites on this, I've got to say, but The Frayed Ends of Sanity, Harvester of Sorrow, I've already repeated the track list, but Harvester of Sorrow is very slow, but the guitars sound so good on this track. Hetfield sounds so constantly angry. And of course, I've got to speak of the problems of the bass. The bass is not that audible on this album. Jason Newsted, the first album that he did after replacing Cliff Burton, couldn't have been easy. Can you imagine this album with Cliff Burton and that original bass sound on there? Whew, would have been incredible, even better. For a lot of people, Master of Puppets is the better album, and it's probably, well, the production's definitely better, but I love the progressive and heavier style and edge of this album. It just fits. I love the anger of it. You can tell it's very, very aggressive constantly. I've not even spoken about Blackened. I mean, I told you it was maybe an environmental track loosely, but it's so damn aggressive. Yeah, not much more to say. I'm just going around in circles with this one. Everyone knows it. But And Justice for All by Metallica, my second favourite metal album. And it's time for number one, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, Metallica are an incredibly popular band, the most popular metal band in the world, maybe apart from Iron Maiden, of course. I'm not a Maiden fan, not my style of vocals, sorry. It's just, I can't get into them. I've tried. I actually enjoyed the earlier stuff without Bruce Dickinson more than the Bruce Dickinson style. If you want to tell me where to get into Maiden or get me to try again, please do, because I want to be open-minded, but it's just very cheesy, and they're progressive, don't get me wrong. A lot of their tracks are 8 to 12 minutes and stuff, but it's just not my style. I don't know. But what is my style is Dreaming Neon Black. A popular band within heavy metal music. But of course, everyone knows Metallica. Everyone's heard of Metallica. Everyone's heard of Black Sabbath. Everyone's heard of Megadeth and Slayer and bands like this. But not everyone has heard of Nevermore. And that is who my number one pick here, ladies and gentlemen. January 1999, this was released, running at 66 minutes in length. We've got exclusively clean vocals from Mr. Warrell Dane, and we've got probably one of the most underrated and incredible guitarists in the world in Mr. Jeff Loomis. When I say underrated, like I said before, people within the metal community know how good this guy is and how insanely good he is, but non-metal fans will never have heard of him, and they should have. These guys are from Seattle in the USA, and I don't think they were happy with the outbreak of grunge in the early 90s. I mean, I love grunge. I remember them saying nice things about Alice in Chains, which is cool, because I adore Alice in Chains, but they are mostly a thrash metal band with a progressive edge, and people would also say power metal as well, but I think that's got to do with Warrell Dane's vocals. A very high operatic style, completely making myself look like a hypocrite now, based on what I said about Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden, but you've just got to listen. You've got to listen to Nevermore, you've got to understand. It's really heavy stuff. On Dead Heart in a Dead World, Mr. Loomis is playing with a 7-string guitar. I don't know what I'm talking about. I love music, but I've never played music in my life. But I don't think just anyone can play a 7-string guitar. You've got to know what the hell you're doing. But Neon Black, Dreaming Neon Black, is a... what's it called? Let me have a look here. A concept album, fucking hell. Yeah, it's a concept album. A man who slowly goes insane after losing a woman that he was very close to Progressive levels of insanity are expressed in the songs. He goes through phases of denial and self-blame, blaming God, then denouncing God. The ending is a little tragic, a little depressing, Shakespearean. Everybody dies, it's all happy. That's Warrell Dane being a bit tongue-in-cheek there, I think. But that is the concept story, but it's also mixed in with an incredible true story of his girlfriend, long-term girlfriend, serious girlfriend, going missing and joining a cult, which actually happened, and he never heard from her again. And it says here, he began having nightmares of her crying out to him as she drowned. This has been confirmed by Worrell himself in an older interview, and I've got goosebumps. I mean, you can say that, oh, the lead singer's girlfriend's been abducted by this cult. Was it something she planned or not? Is she alive or is she dead? That is absolutely, genuinely harrowing, but it doesn't just mean that they're going to make a great album out of it, but they did, and that's the thing. So a lot of these tracks, when you listen to them, you got to put yourself in Warrell Dane's shoes, and you're just dragged into this very real world. This is an incredibly, pessimistic and just kind of hate-filled album of humanity. There's a word for it, but I've been rambling on for nearly 40 minutes now and I can't think of fucking anything. Beyond Within, The Death of Passion, I Am the Dog, there's a lot of self-loathing on this album. There's just no hope. It's a very dark album, to say the least. Dreaming Neon Black is the more emotional piece on the album. The lyrics fit completely with the story that I've just told you of his long-term girlfriend. The Fault of the Flesh, Poison God Machine, thrashy, heavier tracks, but the Wikipedia page here says this album is very emotional and contains many slower ballad-type songs, such as Dreaming Neon Black, but also All Play Dead, Cenotaph, No More Will, and Forever. The second half of the album, there are 13 tracks on this album, by the way, but yeah, the second half of the album does slow it down, and the thrashy style just kind of fades and disappears into this slower kind of rock style of music, but there are less crazy solos from Jeff Loomis, and it doesn't really make it worse, it just makes it different. And like I say, it's dark, it's harrowing, it's uncomfortable to listen to, but it's aggressive, it's hate-filled, it's pessimistic, and it's one hell of a journey. And for me, this is my favourite top 10 metal albums of all time. I just think this has got a lot of incredible ingredients that make it a must listen. And in my top 10, no doubt a lot of people will have heard of Rust in Peace by Megadeth and Slayer and Metallica, but you might not have heard this album. And if you haven't, please do. Also look at the fucking album cover. It's her drowning. It's absolutely incredible. And I've got to say, the whole of Nevermore's discography is fantastic. Politics of Ecstasy, Dead Heart in a Dead World, Enemies of Reality had some problems with the production, but it was great. Godless Endeavour was the second best album in my opinion, and even the Obsidian Conspiracy. And they split up in 2010 because the record label forced them to make a more poppy album. They told them to go fuck them, and they just disbanded. Absolutely tragic. How the world needs another Nevermore, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, I am done. My top 10 metal albums of all time. I've been rambling for nearly 40 minutes now, so I'm going to cut it here. I won't be doing another one of these for at least another 6 months, and when I do, I think I'll be returning with a top 10 Beatles albums. Yeah, so I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.